So let's talk about the real reason why Abel Sanchez left Triple G. What is the real reason why Abel Sanchez left Triple G? Triple G, known as Gennady Golovkin, was a dominant champion. He was an absolutely dominant champion. And Abel Sanchez trained Triple G for a considerable period of time. Now, one of my recollections of Triple G is how he throws the left hook. He doesn't throw it like that. He throws it to the top of the head, and it has this different trajectory. And I believe that this was a technique that's been taught by Abel Sanchez. So let's talk about Sanchez. So in this interview that I watched, Sanchez explained that before boxing, he had a construction business. And to him, this was important. It was very important because his construction business had transferable skills to his boxing business. And to be specific, we're talking about communicating effectively to different people, managing different personalities. These are transferable skills in other industries. And I didn't know this, but Sanchez explained. He explained that his first 3 fighters that he trained, or his first 3 boxers that he trained, had become world champion. So this indicates that he had a talent. He had a talent for training boxing. He had a talent for training boxers. He knew how to harvest an effective boxing environment. And he was talented in that area. And of course, when you're training boxing, it's not just about training. It's about education. It's about creating the right environment. Abel Sanchez showed that he had talent in this area. Basically, Abel Sanchez, he learned his craft. He learned boxing. And the important thing here is how he learned his craft. And he stated that he learned his craft in a variety of ways. So he did a lot of library work. So that's going to a library and actually analyzing boxers. And he also watched Emanuel Stewart, the late great Emanuel Stewart, who of course trained Tommy Hearns and Lennox Lewis. And he watched a lot of Alexis Arguello. And the thing that really impressed me about Sanchez, and I was really impressed by Sanchez in this interview, was his philosophy. And he has this philosophy, and this philosophy is that if we expect our fighters to be better, we must be better. And when he talks about the we, he's talking about the trainers. So it's not just about an evolution of a fighter. It's also about the evolution of a trainer. And this protocol of self-improvement for everyone is so important because his premise is if coaches are not improving themselves, how can we have this expectation on the fighters? And this again is learning the craft. And he stated that in this period, he worked a lot of corners. So he worked a lot of corners. So he was in the corners with other fighters. And he also learned the art of wrapping. He was wrapping other fighters' hands, working corners. And to me, this is just developing the mastery of boxing. And I think it's a beautiful thing that whatever you pursue, that you try to pursue it at an elite level, that you try to become a master of it. And it's clear that Sanchez treated this period of going to the library, watching Emanuel Stewart, watching Alexis Arguello, understanding the importance of self-improvement, working the corners, wrapping hands. This was an important part of his development, and it was an important part of him becoming a master. Now, before we talk about Golovkin, before we talk about his relationship in Triple G and the split, I just want to mention a few more things. So he would suggest that by watching Emanuel Stewart, this is what he learned. And he learned that he was not negative in the corner, and he would suggest ideas. And this is important because there's a difference between suggesting, or there's a difference between making suggestions and telling someone what to do. So you could say to a fighter, try the double left hook. That's a suggestion. Or you could say, you've got to throw the double left hook now. That is not a suggestion. That is telling someone what to do. So he understood that the way he assimilated the information was that it's better to make suggestions as opposed to telling the fighters what to do. Because by making suggestions, he understood that in boxing, there's many different perspectives. There's the trainer perspective on what they can see, but there's also the boxer's perspective on what they can see as well. And by making suggestions, you're respecting that perspective. And additional to this, Sanchez knew that a fight can be won or lost in the corner. So it's going back to the corner, obviously is an opportunity for a boxer to recuperate, but it's also an opportunity for them to soak up some information. And it's important here that Sanchez understands the importance of the communication process between fighter and trainer, and he's respecting the boxer perspective and obviously the trainer perspective. And I think that's something important to mention. So let's talk about Triple G. And he did speak about their relationship, and he spoke positively about the relationship, and that is a good thing. And he spoke about this part in Triple G's career where he was struggling to find a trainer. Perhaps they didn't see the vision. And he spoke about how impressed he was with Triple G when he met him. And in their first official meeting, Triple G came with a satchel, and he stated to Sanchez that he came to train, not to party. And that to me says everything about Triple G, that he's a serious man. He's a man with purpose. He's a man with a mission. He's coming to engage in mastery. He's coming to be the best version of himself. So this was, at first, and for a long period of time, a beneficial relationship. And Sanchez spoke about when he worked with Triple G, he worked with him on the mitts. And when he worked with him on the mitts, he was impressed with the power. And he knew that he had potential. I believe he said that he stated that he could be like the next Julius Caesar Chavez, I believe the reference was. So he saw the potential within the first week of working him on the mitts. He understood that Gennady Golovkin, he could be an elite fighter. He just needed to be nurtured, given the right strategy, and engage in the right boxing environment. So amidst all of this, Triple G, he's developing. And actually, Sanchez tells an interesting story. And we believe this story is about George Groves, even though he doesn't mention his name. He doesn't mention his name. He just says a British fighter. So there's this story of who we think is George Groves. He came, I think it was to Big Bear, to spar Triple G. He came to dominate, as you would expect. He came to set the tone. And in their exchanges and in their heated battle, GG broke his ribs. And ultimately, that sent Groves home. I will say allegedly because he didn't mention Groves' name. This again shows the power of Triple G. Power at an elite level. Remember, George Groves was a champion, assuming that it was George Groves that did that. The reason why people are saying it's George Groves is because actually George Groves has, I believe, told this story or a similar story of sparring Golovkin and it not being favorable. But going back to Triple G, Sanchez said that he saw the vision. He saw the vision, and he said that he had a board. And he said on the board, he would have names of great fighters. So number 1 would be Muhammad Ali, and number 2 would be blank, and then he would have all the other great fighters. And he said that he told Triple G that he could be the second greatest fighter of all time. And that to me just kind of shows that, yes, you can see that Sanchez is developing his ability to teach. He's learned his trade. He's learning his mastery. But also you can see that he has this optimistic expectation of Triple G. He sees that he can reach the mountaintop. And that's really important, I think, for a fighter's confidence. So he had this, I wouldn't call it expectation, but he could see the vision, and he communicated that vision of what Triple G could become. So he spoke about that. And on a side note, they also spoke about what Sanchez mentioned about his fighters having great chins or great punching resistance. And he made reference that in his gym, he makes fighters do lots of neck exercises. So that's an interesting situation there, because when I think about it, a lot of Sanchez's fighters have great fighting durability. Now, is that due to the neck exercises that he makes the fighters do? Or is it due to the fighters that he selects, that he works with? Or is it a combination of both? But it seems that this parallel between doing the neck exercises and having greater punch resistance, that seems like an interesting observation. Anyway, another thing that Sanchez states is that Triple G listened to his leadership. He listened to Sanchez. He was receptive. And also, and this is something that's probably overlooked, he also spoke about the importance of the promotion, because once they found the right promoter, the right doors started to open, and he started to get really good sponsorships, and doors opened, and his career gained momentum. And obviously under Sanchez, Triple G went on to be a dominant champion. A very dominant champion. And of course, there was that first fight with Canelo. And from Sanchez's perspective, and it's not just Sanchez that thinks this, he felt that they won the fight. And many people would agree with that assertion. So this relationship between Sanchez and Triple G, it was a very positive relationship, and it had lots of great results. But of course, it came to an end. And this is where Sanchez gives his perspective. The breakup, many fans wondered, why did they break up? Why did the relationship between Triple G and Sanchez end? And unsurprisingly, the breakup was about money. Triple G, according to Sanchez, offered a lower compensation structure. And this lower compensation structure was a financial downgrade, or what some would call a major pay cut. And according to Sanchez, this is what triggered the split. So the split was not about their relationship. It wasn't about their personal boxing relationship. It wasn't about the decisions, because obviously they had so much success together. But it was about Triple G bringing in a new team who were doing financial restructuring. And it was primarily a financial decision. It makes us realize, or it made me realize, that boxing, like many things under capitalism, is a business. They made an offer to Sanchez. He did a counteroffer. They didn't like the counteroffer, and he decided to step away. The saddest thing is that even though this was a financial dispute, it wasn't something personal. Sanchez stated that he hasn't spoken to Golovkin since. And I think that's really sad. And it's sad because from the outside looking in, these look like two people that actually have integrity. And considering the relationship they had, considering the major impact they had on boxing, it's a shame that that's how things are. I get the feeling with this interview that Sanchez wants to reach out to Triple G. Maybe this interview can trigger a conversation. Perhaps if Triple G had a conversation with Sanchez, maybe they can become amicable. Maybe they could have a nice moment. At best, maybe they can have some closure, some positive closure. Sometimes we go in different directions, but that doesn't mean that closure isn't beneficial. And sometimes things aren't just beneficial in a financial way. Sometimes things are beneficial for the soul, for the heart, or for a peace of mind. From a boxing perspective, I'm just grateful that they blessed us with some great fights. And they, of course, being Triple G and Sanchez, because collectively, they really were quite something. And I think it's quite correct to state that once he left Sanchez, it appeared that Triple G was never the same again. Sanchez created an environment that really brought Triple G to the top of the mountaintop. And like I said, I really hope that they are able to get to a better place. And from my perspective, getting this understanding about Abel Sanchez just wants me to know more about him, because he's very interesting. And like I said, it looks like Sanchez wants peace, and hopefully this interview can trigger something where he can reach that peaceful place with Triple G.